I'm here with Biz Stone, co-founder of Twitter, entrepreneur and all-round optimist, and the author of his new memoir, Things a Little Bird Told Me. Welcome to the show, Biz.
Thank you so much for having me.
Look, this is just a totally positive book. You sort of walk away from it feeling, woohoo, really uplifting. Lots of nice aphorisms about how to be creative, how to follow your dreams.
Yep.
But you dropped out of college, you took on an enormous amount of credit card debt, and then ultimately everything worked out. Is this really the path for everybody to take?
Yeah, no, not necessarily. I mean, everyone has to find their own path. And I also wouldn't really characterize it as a memoir, although the lessons are from my own life. You know, they say write what you know. You know, what I did, I grew up with no money. You know, we were on welfare many times, and then my whole adult life I was deeply in debt because I was always taking risks. I was always trying to, you know, start something. But what I learned was you really just have to think about money in an abstract way. Think about it as a tool, and then once you can do that, you can make the correct decisions for your life. And I talk about this in the book, but I really found the one key piece of advice, if I were to only offer one piece of advice to young people who are, you know, thinking of starting a company or you know, dropping out of school or anything, really, is you have to have an emotional investment in what you're doing. If you don't love what you're doing, failure is pretty much guaranteed. Success is not guaranteed by any means, but failure is much more likely if you don't love what you're doing.
And we'll talk about failure a little later on because it's a critical part of the way that you go about approaching these things. But since you talk about emotional investment, I want you to read a passage for me from the book.
All right.
So just read, if you don't mind, from the two paragraphs starting with that dot is there.
All right. That night, there were several parties and lots of packed bars. One person at a particularly crowded pub wanted to hear what his friends and colleagues were working on, but it was just too loud where he was. So this guy sent out a tweet to his followers suggesting that if anyone wanted to enjoy a quieter conversation, they should meet him over at some other pub that he knew to be pretty empty. He named the pub in his tweet. In the 8 minutes it took this guy to walk over to the pub he had suggested, hundreds of people had done the same thing from closer bars. By the time he arrived, the pub was at capacity and there was a long line to get in. His plan had backfired.
So that, of course, was the kind of coming out moment for Twitter, the social media service that you helped found.
Yes.
It was at South by Southwest, and there was this realization that this thing was incredibly powerful.
Yep.
Describe the feeling at that moment.
That was, when I heard that story, that was, I consider that to be, there were many, but I consider that to be the main watershed moment for me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It's when I realized that we weren't just working on something that was fun. We were working on something that was potentially important. We had the metaphor that came to mind when I heard that story was that of a flock of birds moving around an object in flight. Something that looked so choreographed, so beautiful, so complicated. You know, that there's many individuals, and then suddenly they become this almost like one organism for a few moments, and then back to being individuals again. And we see this in nature, right? You know, it has a term. It's called emergence. With the sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and yet there was no such technology that enabled people to do this. So, of course, this was just a party scenario, right? But what immediately came to mind is, what if it had been a disaster or something important? And so that's when I said, wow, we have something here. It was literally, I think, 2 days later, we ran back to San Francisco and we took a plane. But we founded the company, Twitter Inc. Up to that point, it was just a project. You know, that was it for me. That really sold me on, you know, this is something that has merit.
This notion of flocking that you deal with in the book a bit, and you talk about it in a very positive light. It is a force for good. It is a tool, it seems, Twitter and presumably other technology like it, to enable human beings to do good. But let me just address some of the criticisms of Twitter, or at least the criticisms of the kind of world that we now live in, partly as a result of Twitter. People talk about this echo chamber effect, where everybody gathers around followers of a like mind and aren't able to think outside of their sort of their comfort zone. The prevalence of trolls, the rise of bots and things like that. What do you think about those sort of problems and the criticisms people have of Twitter in that context?
Well, so Twitter isn't my first foray into building these large-scale systems that allow people to express themselves and communicate. You know, I worked on Blogger before Twitter. I worked on a very early sort of progenitor of social blogging networks. And what I've come to learn is that people are basically good. And when you give them the right tools, they'll prove that to you every day. But you can't have that without bad. You know, everything casts a shadow. You know, you can't have light without dark, you know. I mean, it just doesn't work. So some percentage of people are going to be bad actors. What I've learned, though, is that percentage is very small compared to the overall good. And it's just when you have a success like Twitter, when you have hundreds of millions of people using your service on a daily basis, you're going to have bad actors, and it's a good problem to have.
Right. I want to call up an image. It's somewhat of a beloved image amongst certainly the early Twitter followers, Twitter users, and it is this image of the fail whale.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that, because of course it is an image of failure, but ultimately it became something of a symbol of success as well, because you're able to turn this disadvantage to your advantage and kept the faith with the users. Describe how you dealt with that.
Well, I talk about this in the book too. I think there's value in vulnerability. I think that if you, if you present your company, your service, your product, whatever it is, as sort of bulletproof or impenetrable, then you're going to get, you're going to get punished anytime you aren't such. So the image of the fail whale was. It was this whale. It was this big creature. It was a cartoon image that I selected, but illustration. But it was this big creature being lifted up by lots of little birds, and it was suggesting that we put it up whenever the service was broken. It was like, we're working on it. We're trying our best, and what it did was it humanized the brand. It helped build our brand. It helped people realize that we weren't just nameless, faceless folks. We were real people trying our best to provide a free service, and we were just as frustrated when it broke as they were. And in a weird way, I think our failure helped us succeed. People complained so loudly when the service was down that other people were like, well, why are you so upset that this thing is down? I got to check this out. You're acting like your electricity was just turned off. This must be important.
So important, yeah. So, after that, of course, a number of years after that, Twitter went public. You, before that, had left the company, and you'd also sold some of your shares.
Yeah.
You weren't listed amongst the top shareholders when it went public. Any regrets that you got out early and missed out on this big financial bonanza at all?
No way. I mean, absolutely not. I mean, I always... this is just, everyone makes their own choices, but I am very happy with mine. And, I kept a substantial amount of ownership in the company, and, this is just the way. This is for me, having lived a life where I never had any money and was always in debt, it was the right thing to do. And I had a lot of people that I had to take care of, and I needed to make the right decision.
Has that changed the way you view money?
Well, it's changed the way I live my life in that I don't have that anxiety anymore. I mean, just that constant anxiety of not being able to, choosing which bill to pay that month. That constant stress, that constant anxiety makes every little thing into like a fight with your partner or your spouse. When you have enough money, it's like an immune system. It's like, okay, we have enough money now. And my theory on having great wealth is that what it really does is it just amplifies the type of person you are. So for me, I've discovered that the thing I like to do most is help other people. So having great wealth now enables me to do that. It enables me to be more active in my philanthropic endeavors, and it allows me to, start a whole new company whose Jelly, which the tagline is, Jelly helps people. I mean, this is what money has enabled me to do. It's enabled me to, help more people.
Any thoughts about where things are headed now? I mean, Wall Street, of course, is now a major factor in what happens with Twitter. Any concerns that some of the sort of idealism that was part of that early mission that you had is undermined at all by the demand for advertising, the demand for sort of building users?
No, I think Twitter is aimed in the right direction. You know, I take a very long view of these things. If you take a long view of Twitter now, you'll understand that it really just got started. Twitter has just now become a public company. Twitter is going to be a timeless company of enduring value. We built a deep executive bench. We built a incredible, talented team of people that are going to take this company all the way. And when you look at it in terms of decades, you realize that it's gonna be a success, and And I believe that I, as well as my fellow co-founders, helped set this company on the right trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Now, as part of this process, preparing for the interview, we sent out and solicited questions using a social media service known as Twitter. And we got some tweets back from people suggesting questions for you. So let's just go through one of them at this stage.
Sure thing.
This one's from Dennis Surt. And it says, Dennis would like to know your views on internet governance in the world. Turkey, of course, quite notoriously banning Twitter recently, and Brazil passing a law on equal access, and so forth. Any thoughts on where this is headed?
I don't know where it's headed, and I can't predict this sort of thing. But I like to describe myself as an internet guy who believes in the triumph of humanity with a little help from technology. So I'm all for the freedom of expression and open internet. More and more ways to innovate. That's my optimistic, aspirational, admittedly hallucinogenic, optimistic way of looking at things. But I'm all for, like, let's open her up.
Okay. Speaking of this technology that's changing, there is a sense that we are in a sort of hyper moment at the moment. Google's got Google Glass coming out, driverless cars. We've got Elon Musk talking about hyperlinks. People referencing artificial intelligence, and yet at the same time, millions of people still unemployed in this country, a massive and increasing wealth inequality problem, and generally a sense that not everybody's being dragged along by the coattails of Silicon Valley's success. Can you speak to that, and whether or not this is always going to be the case, or there might be a way in which we equalize things?
Well, I just can't. I think a boom time should be good. There should be a way that everyone wins. I think we can figure it out. I don't have the answers yet. It's sort of, this is a recent phenomenon, but I think there are enough people thinking about it now that that we should be able to have, everyone should be able to win somehow with this incredible boom time. And you referenced artificial intelligence. How about just intelligence? I know we'll get to it later, but my new company, Jelly, what we're doing is we're harnessing actual intelligence of people. The new, you've heard of the 6 degrees of separation. There was a recent study that came out that said that is now 4. Everybody on the planet is connected to everybody else by 4 degrees of separation now because of social and mobile. And that means that with today's media landscape, we can ask a question and we can get an answer from potentially anyone else in the world.
Which is the principle behind Jelly. So tell us, you're actually launching a new part of the service today, I understand, right? So tell us a little bit about how it's going.
We launched 3 months ago, and then just yesterday afternoon we updated the app significantly. The way Jelly works is it basically combines all of your social networks into one. Mm-hmm. And then when you ask a question, it goes not just 1 degree out, like 1 friend group out, but 2 out. And then from there, it also includes location. Mm-hmm. Those friends of friends can also then forward your query to get to someone you don't even know. So it takes advantage of this concept, which you probably have heard of, called the strength of weak ties, mm-hmm. where you and your circle of friends kind of generally know the same sort of stuff. But then you have that one acquaintance, that your lawyer, who's connected to a whole different group of people who know a lot of other stuff. Mm-hmm. And with Jelly, you can get into that group, and someone from that group can answer a question of yours. Mm-hmm. So it's based on that sort of premise. I mean, an example might be, this is a mundane example, but you might be, say you're in a new neighborhood and you want to try some street food. So you say, you use the maps aspect of Jelly, and you say, let's say you have like food restrictions, and you say, so what's a good veggie food truck? And a minute later, you get a friend drops a pin right on a place where you should go. Try Hella Vegan Eats, and now you have a great answer from a trusted source, and you know exactly where to walk. This is the concept behind Jelly. It's things computers can't do. Anything you can look at and take a picture of, you can ask what it is. Okay. That sort of stuff. Let's
just flip back to Twitter just quickly, because one of the questions that came in here was from Kyle Waring. And Kyle asked, Biz, if you were to identify the #1 misstep in growing Twitter, what would it be?
Well, we didn't build a system that would scale. That was obvious. You referenced the fail whale. Mm-hmm. We were constantly just fixing things and putting out fires, and that didn't enable us to innovate. That didn't enable us to, build in new features, build pictures in earlier, like that sort of thing. That being said, I wouldn't go back in time, and I wouldn't change anything, because it turned out great.
Right.
All of our missteps somehow got us to where we are, so that's fantastic. But really, we didn't build a company. We didn't anticipate success.
Well, we have, just before we go, we have one routine, a little ritual that we have at the end of our interviews for Afterword, and that is that we ask the guests to pick one of 3 standard questions. Okay. So you're going to pull one out of there, you're going to read it out loud, and you're going to answer it.
All right.
There you go.
It's like a fortune.
It is something like that. It could be.
What book or writer had the most influence on your life, and why? Okay. Steven Johnson. Stephen Berlin Johnson is the author of a book. His first book was called Emergence. Right. And it dealt with exactly what I was talking about. This concept that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. He talks about ant colonies, and how no one ant is a genius, but if you look at an ant colony as a single organism, they've done these amazing things. Like they keep their larder exactly mathematically the farthest distance away as possible from their graveyard, and like they do these hyper intelligent things as a group. Right. But no one ant is like a genius. And so that concept of emergence really helped start shaping the way that I think about large-scale systems on the internet. Right. And it really had a big impact on my work.
It's a great metaphor for everything Twitter is, or at least aspires to be, the ants that we have amongst us. The book is Things a Little Bird Told Me. Thanks for joining us.